There is something I need to tell you, but not here. You don't seem to understand. You think it's just escapism. You think there's no room for rules, logic, common sense, realism. But I know it could be so much more if only... if only you could stop being such a little weed. Funny. I remember putting the camera on the stairs and leaving it there. Oh, I guess I can record here. All right, that seems nice. So I want to talk about two recent videos that I'm not really happy with in terms of direction. You know, this whole thing of overthinking fantasy and ranting about it, picking it apart, serves really no purpose. There's no reason. I mean, like people have pointed out in the past, it's just fantasy. You know, so there's something to be said about immersing yourself in something that's larger than life, in all its epic proportions, all the craziness that goes along with that, and just enjoy this world as escapism, as a break from this boring, mundane world where you can't have all these spectacular things. It just seems so silly to take these things at face value and then, you know, poke fun at them and all that. I feel like it's much better to just, you know, just immerse yourself in the sheer joy of the experience. If it seems like I'm losing my mind, that's because... Whoa, what's going on? Are you okay? Why are you just lying down in the snow there? That can't be comfortable here. Let me help you up. Wow. You've had a rough time, haven't you? Well, although it can't be comfortable to lie in the snow, it's a nice day to be out, isn't it? Idyllic. Do you have a minute? Or maybe several? It's something I want to talk about. Some of the recent videos I made, and over the years too, and some of the responses that I've gotten made me reflect and realize something is kind of weird. There's a bit of a split. Where do I start? Okay, so in the beginning, not all the way in the beginning, just in the beginning of my channel, no, well, the second beginning. It began all the way back in 2008. We're not going to talk about that. Like 2013, 14-ish, when it started taking off. One of the things I did was rant about unrealistic fantasy stuff. And like overanalyze it, pluck it apart, why this wouldn't work in real life, etc., etc. And a lot of those videos were really popular. And even though a lot of people liked them, from the start, there were always comments like, it's just fantasy. To varying degrees of annoyance, agitation, anger, as far as you can tell by a comment, but some people made it very clear that they were rather upset by that and found it stupid. And at first, I just dismissed that, like, oh, come on, you don't get the point, and yeah, sure, it's just fantasy, but it can still be internally consistent, make sense, and be logical, blah, blah, blah. More and more, when I see that, I'm like, you're not wrong. It is kind of weird, isn't it? It also doesn't help that when talking about liking one thing, it's easy for others to assume that you dislike the opposite. But you can absolutely appreciate the more complex writing involved in, say, hard magic systems that define clear rules and explain how it works, while you can also enjoy soft magic with its mystery and chaos and unexpected twists and turns. Each of those approaches can be either good or bad, depending on the overall quality of the writing. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, okay, so what do I like that's realistic? Like, which highly realistic games are my favorites? What's the total list of my favorite games? Highly realistic games don't rank that far up. Kingdom Come Deliverance, for example. It stands out because it's way more historically accurate and realistic than just about any other game. It's interesting to some people because of that, and it's boring to me because of that. If you watched a bunch of my videos, you might be like, what are you talking about? You love realism. yes and no, but more no, actually. Okay, hang in there. My ramblings are going to make sense sooner or later, I think. So I made a video where I responded to Gabe Newell talking about realism and fun, and how realism's not fun, and how he doesn't understand why game designers would bring that up. Like, well, that's not realistic. And he's like, who cares? I don't want it to be realistic. I interpreted it a little bit too rigidly. Then I pointed out, well, you know, the examples of Half-Life of what makes the game interesting and fun is that the environment responds to you, which it does by elements of realism. But obviously, it's Gabe Newell. The man has been in the video game industry for a long time and made fundamental contributions. He knows that, right? Obviously he does. So, and some people have pointed out what he meant was the focus on realism basically for its own sake. What people pointed out in that video is basically realism shovelware. You know, a bunch of gray and gray shooters, all generic, they all look the same. They all focus on making the weapon models accurate and then realistic reloading and then blah, 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 to varying extents. Some literally keep track of, okay, you have so and so many cartridges in this magazine, whatever. Others abstract that. Like, okay, you have so and so many cartridges, you eject that magazine, put a new one in, it's full, whatever. It only keeps track of your total ammo. It's not realistic because the ammo's not going to unload and dump itself into a bag of loose cartridges, but who cares? Right? There are games that care about that, like Project Zomboid, for example. It's always the typical example of something where the realistic elements add something to it. They make the gameplay more complex, also more tedious, and that's kind of the problem. Some people are into that, others aren't. Am I into that? Yay, nay? What the hell do I mean by that? Well, there are games that will absolutely hook you and will just addict you. You can't stop. But then when you do like a vibe check, so to speak, how much fun am I having right now? Like, there's some fun, of course, but there's more addictiveness than fun. An ultra-realistic medieval simulator would statistically be something like you're a serf, for the most part confined to your lord's manor. Some of your quests are getting permission from your lord to do something like marry somebody. Your main activity is you work the land, grow crops, not in a Harvest Moon kind of way, where you just, you know, leisurely do what you feel like at the time, and you go out, meet different people, and you know, take on optional quests. There's a bunch of mandatory quests, like these, so you have so and so many crops you have to grow, and then you give a percentage of that to your lord. If you don't have enough left after that to eat, sucks to be you. There's some crafting. Every now and then you have a quest like scrape enough money together to go to the barber to get a rotten tooth pulled. And there's some mini game where you have to manage your pain levels. And then you die of typhoid or the Black Death or what have you. And then the game uninstalls itself and removes itself from your Steam library so you can never play it again because, well, you're dead. You don't get another chance. One of the things that makes games interesting and engaging and immersive is consequences. But moderate consequences, you know, like the right consequences. I feel like in the early days it was interesting because realism was quite rare. And even the games that pursued it to some extent didn't go terribly far. So it was like novelty. Like, oh, hey, look at that, it's actually realistic. And as a side note, one of the points I made about elements of realism, like every game has elements of realism, you know, it's technically correct, but if you said Super Mario Brothers, like the original NES, is not realistic, what kind of super nerd goes,
well, actually, there's gravity and there's collision between solid objects.
Who gives a shit? Like, yes, it's technically correct, but it's a distinction without a difference. In colloquial terms, if you will, what people mean when they say a game is not realistic is it doesn't focus on an exceptionally high level of realism. Like, it doesn't pursue realism as a main goal, right? Anyway, so when I examine what I actually enjoy, it makes me feel like a hypocrite because it's usually not all that high in realism. Like, for example, I prefer Saints Row over GTA. Not because it's objectively better, but because there's some more crazy shit you can do. Usually I gravitate more towards things that are not like the mundane real world, because the mundane real world kind of sucks, actually. You know, like, it's more interesting to have sci-fi and magic and take the role of a super powerful hero who, you know, just isn't affected by consequences the same way as your average person. Like, even in GTA, yeah, you can go to jail, but then you don't have to play like a long, boring segment, work out all day and shank dudes who look at you the wrong way.
So you may be wondering, why make all these videos ranting about that stuff then? Well, because sometimes it's fun to overthink and overanalyze. A lot of people do that casually here and there, like poking fun at plot holes, or how an actor forgot that they're still wearing a wristwatch on the set of a historical movie, or discussing some bizarre hypotheses with your friends for how Santa actually fits through the damn chimney, stuff like that. Yeah, it's silly, but fun. Not to everyone, and not all the time, but it's a thing.
And here's another question. Is that even really a contradiction? Not trying to get pretentiously philosophical here, but every personality is complex. Like, you don't just like one exact thing that's clearly and sharply defined in contrast to everything else. You can like both seemingly contradictory things. Believe that a certain amount of realism adds something to the gameplay, and you can believe that it's counteracting the fun in the game. Or can you? You probably can. Anyway, I think one of the main reasons I felt like making this video is to bring across the point of self-reflection. Just to realize that sometimes there might be contradictions in what you say and do, and like or don't, or say you don't like, or whatever. And when somebody else points it out, or criticizes what you say, rather than just brush it aside like, you didn't get it, or you're wrong, or whatever. It's good to stop and take a moment to think, does the person have a point, maybe? Like, is it silly to rant about fantasy? And you may not get an easy answer, because, especially on the internet, you'll always get both positive and negative reinforcement. Like, whatever you do, some people will tell you, this is great, yes, please, more of it. And others will tell you, what a bunch of garbage, you're stupid, you're out of your mind, you're ridiculous, whatever. Both are true. We're not talking about mathematics here, or physics, or something. There is no distinct, objectively verifiable answer. You like what you like. Video over. And also, changing your mind has a bit of a stigma. You know, like, especially when you're a dude, a male socialized, you're kind of socialized into, it's weakness to show uncertainty or change your mind. You gotta be firm, pick a spot, you know, pick this hill to die on, and that's it. No, it's not. You should absolutely change your mind when you learn something new, or when you think of, in fact, even, you know, if you think about something, you change your mind, you think about it some more, or that there's like more data coming in, or somebody else tells you something that you then think about, and you're like, you know what, actually my initial take was kind of right. And then you revert that again. It looks bad, you know, from the outside, because, oh, this person's just flip-flopping, I don't even have an opinion, what the hell? No, that's just how it goes sometimes. It's always funny to me when somebody brings up an old video, like 10 years old or 15, they expect that it's all still the same. Like, every opinion expressed is still held in the exact same way. Like, maybe, or maybe not. And that's, of course, a problem with this format. You know, like this video format. There's several problems with it. One is, you know, it's just once you put it out, it's out there, and you can't amend it. And, of course, you're monologuing. There's no counter argument, which then in the moment makes you think, oh yeah, I haven't thought of that. Maybe I should blah, blah, blah. This is rigid. And my battery indicator is flashing. I need to get the hell out of here and wrap it up, so. Okay, dude. This app is great and all, being able to remote control the camera like that, but sometimes it's unreliable. Like right now. What are you doing? You piece of shit.